It's Alva here of Alva Art, and there have been a lot of questions about how to buy a digital camera and what kind of camera do I need and what would be good. And I'd like to work a few of those questions out. If you'll notice up here on the screen right now, we have a side profile of a SLR digital. Looks like a 35 millimeter format type camera. A long time ago, you have to follow the mouse, but a long time ago, this backside here on the far right is where the film used to roll through, and light would come through the lens where you see that blue line, and it would strike this back plane where the film was, and then later on we developed single lens reflexes, where basically the light would come in, it would bounce off of a mirror, go back up through a diagonal prism, and come back out a viewfinder, and we could see what you see is what you get kind of type of thing, which is really kind of nice. We enjoyed that. As we moved into the digital era, we replaced film with sensors, and that's where it becomes very important on what you want to buy and how you want to buy it. You want to pick a very good sensor in a camera if you can, and you also want to pick a reasonable quality brand that you're comfortable and familiar with. I'll kind of give you a rough estimate of how it works here. Basically, as I'm drawing up here, we have a lens on our cameras, and if you'll notice, there'll be let me get a good brush tool here. If you'll notice, on most of your cameras you have something called a lens. Excuse my bad drawing. I'm using a drawing board. I'm not any good at it, but that's okay. You'll get the message. And then we have the body of the camera, which looks really good. This is a great art. And then of course back here on this line is where the light is actually going to strike the final destination. Our focal plane in this particular case will be a sensor, and there are different types of sensors, but that's basically where the image is going to hit. And then of course with all the computer stuff, it'll be converted to digital information. In the past there was rolls of film on either side, and as we advance that film, we'd move that through. So that's exactly where the film would rest. And of course on a lot of single lens reflexes, we have a mirror right across here. In this case we won't. The light comes in through the lens right here. So the image, let's say there's a person standing out here by a tree, and they're not leaning very much. They're just leaning a little bit. And this person is standing here, and we want to capture that film onto our sensor. Well, what happens is the light from the head of that person will come through the center of that and strike down here. And basically, if you'll notice, everything will be upside down and backwards. That means all the light crosses over in the center of this lens. Lens quality becomes very important. We want to make sure that we have a good quality, high quality type of lens in our camera. So that's something that you may want to consider when you're purchasing your camera. In this particular case, a good digital camera probably will have a nice glass lens. So I would recommend getting a glass lens for sure. That would be one of the important things. The other thing that I'd look at is the size of this sensor. How big is this sensor? Well, they number things like, oh, it's 12 megapixels, or it's 10 megapixels, or whatever. And that's all well and good. That means how many pixels are going to be on this sensor. But the size of this sensor right here is still a critical thing. If we can make a sensor the size of a postage stamp, and we can stick if we can make it 12 megapixels on the size of a postage stamp, the clarity of that image is not going to be nearly as good if we have a sensor the size of a 35 millimeter negative, or even a 4 1/4. So the larger the sensor also makes a significant difference on the quality of the information that we're capturing. So you want to make sure that when you're looking at something, that you're looking at apples and apples, and not apples and bananas or something else that doesn't work well. So find out that it's a good quality, nice, good size sensor. Do your work. Generally look up information on there. 3 or 4 types of cameras that I really recommend. I myself like a Pentax because I've always used them. They're very hardy. I taught school for 31 years. Our Pentax cameras could be dropped on the floor and picked back up, 35 millimeter format at the time, but when they were dropped, they were picked back up and they worked great. However, some cameras today, some of the cameras weren't quite so durable. The other thing we want to look at is the lens, and what they're going to say when you buy a camera. Oh, this has a 20 times opticals or 20 times zoom, and 20 times zoom means diddly squat unless they use the word optical, and you have to have that. Let's see if I can spell it right. You have to have that optical zoom on there. And if you don't have the word optical, I wouldn't go by it very well, because 20 times zoom means that there's digital information that's stored on this sensor, and they can just magnify it through the computers that are in the camera. So you have the same amount of data that's being stretched, where if you had a 20 optical zoom, you get really close to your target. So that's a very important factor. And then last but not least, another important factor, of course, is going to be cost. How much can you afford, and what can you afford? And I try to have somebody, when they come up and ask, will you help me choose a camera? I say, okay, what budget are we working in? And generally, there's 3 or 4 different kinds. I find that on the low end of the point and shoots, and I can bring a digital 35 millimeter into the frame here. If I can bring it in, I can show you what it'll look like. A digital 35 millimeter camera, if we look at it on the inside, you can see there's the sensor right there. There's the lens, the glass lens. The lens that is generally autofocus lens, because that's what it says right there on this Canon drawing. That autofocus lens has bunches of little motors and glasses and lenses that move around. Very expensive, very sophisticated technology. And this right here is a well-made, and Canon likes to make a lot of their own lenses, and they're good quality glass lenses. So Canon is a good brand. I highly recommend a Canon. And then there's other brands too that I would recommend. Another one that is a very good brand that a lot of people like are the Nikons. And the Nikons, they're a beautiful camera. They're well made. They've got beautiful lenses on them. They're very fast, and of course they're good quality as well. And then last but not least, there's what's called a point and shoot camera. And the point and shoot camera, I think probably is popular for a lot of, I'm going to say, lesser end budget type things. So a point and shoot camera, but Sony likes to buy Carl Zeiss lenses, and I'm going to tell you something. That's a nice lens. It's a good lens, a good camera for the product, for the money. Once again, I'm telling you that I really prefer the durability, the weather protection, and everything that Pentax puts into their cameras. Without talking too much more, because this has been a relatively long little talk and demonstration, if you're getting ready to buy a camera, figure out the size of the image that you want. This has a 3 times optical zoom. That's what you're going to get. That's all you're going to get on that cyber shot. There's not a lot of optical in there. And then some cameras, if you go with a digital camera like the one that's behind this one, you're not going to have to worry so much about the optical or digital zoom, because you're going to buy separate lenses that have different purposes. So if low-end budget, $100 to $300, point and shoot, I tend to think that Sony is probably one of the easiest to operate. A very, very nice camera. $200 to $400, I would go with Pentax on point and shoot, and then if I started to move in the upper end, 4 to 500, I probably would move into Canon or Nikon, either one of those. And then we get back up into the $800 range. Of course, I'll choose a Pentax first, because that's the camera of choice for me. But I'm going to tell you that you're not going to hurt at all if you go with a Nikon, Pentax, Sony, or a Canon in any of those cameras. There's a few others out there that are okay, but in my opinion, that's the way to go. So I'll talk more about the cameras in the next talk.